The Boundary Boss Base feature in SolidWorks is a great tool for creating complex 3D geometry. Like it says in the name, it's created by using curves to define the boundaries of the feature. The boundaries can be defined in two different ways, which I'll show you here in a moment. The Boundary Boss tool may seem a bit similar to the sweep or loft features, so it can often be confusing to decide which feature should be used. I'll go through some of the differences, and you can get a better idea of when the Boundary Boss feature is more suitable. For this sketch here, I'll first try using a sweep feature. I'll start the sweep feature and select the profile and path. And you can see that I can only create the sweep in a single direction. I'll instead start the Boundary Boss Base feature. For Direction 1, I'll select the closed profile, and I'll add the second curve to the Direction 2 box. This time, the solid body is created along the whole path, and I can even drag the endpoints to control the feature length. I can also define tangency types for the curves. And I can show zebra stripes or curvature combs to help visualize the surfaces. Even though the sweep and boundary seem to give you similar results in this example, it's important to note the differences. Because the Boundary Boss uses the second curve as a boundary rather than a path, the feature goes along the whole curve, regardless of direction. If I edit the path and create some sharper turns, and then create the Boundary Boss again, you can see the feature updates, and you get results that are a little different than you might expect. Certainly quite different than you'd get with a sweep feature. I'll create a sweep instead. You can see that the part is created as you'd expect in the one direction. If I go under Options and get the orientation to keep normal constant, you can see it now looks pretty similar to the Boundary Boss, and in fact is how the Boundary Boss is calculated. So as you can see, while the two features can often give you the possibility of similar results, in certain situations, you'll get more control with one feature or the other. Next, let me show you the second way to define a Boundary Boss. I'll start the Boundary Boss feature and select both of these curves for Direction 1. This looks pretty similar to a loft, and in fact will often give you the same results as a loft. But again, there are some subtle differences. The loft feature is created between two separate curves, and a guide curve can be used to influence the transition. In a boundary feature, as we saw just a moment ago, the Direction 2 curve acts as a boundary to the feature and is given the same weight as the Direction 1 curves. As a result, boundary features give you different control over the transition between the curves and also more control over the curvature at the edges. For example, I have the ability to drag this point anywhere on the rectangle to change the curvature however I want, but with a loft, I am only able to move the curvature point to the vertices. If you're just making basic shapes, you probably won't notice much difference between lofts and boundary features. But if you need to create more complex shapes, one feature over another may create nicer surfaces in addition to the increased control over transition and edge curvatures. Because of this, I would recommend experimenting with the different features, and over time, you'll be able to quickly decide which feature will be the most appropriate for the design you're working on.